meaning that it talks to, let me start sharing. It talks to other services, right? And like kind of organizes, multiple different um, like resources, I guess. I'm using vague words, but in our example, right, it would be if we have to kind of connect these three different services, like our LTP database, our S3, right? We want to load data into S3, um, and then eventually move that data over to Redshift, right? Airflow can orchestrate this, right? Meaning it can talk to RDS, talk to S3, talk to Redshift, and move data, basically execute commands that then move data one to the other. One way to think of Airflow, like very practically, is this like a scheduler? It's a scheduler that again like kind of allows you to connect different services, or at least connect two different services, and then pull data from one, move it to the other, to the third. Okay. Um, all right. So in terms of using it, so there's this like Docker Compose YAML file that is predefined, right? I got it basically from Airflow. And let's just start by doing Docker Compose up. And then while this is booting up, it does take a little while, we can take a look at the Docker Compose file. So, this is, like I said, it's more complicated, obviously, than the ones we've been using. The most important thing are these lines right here. Okay, this is bind mounting, right? This is what we've seen before with bind mounting. It's saying there should be a DAGs folder in like the Docker context, right, on your laptop essentially, or wherever Airflow is running, and that's going to point to this opt Airflow DAGs folder in the container. And like the logs folder, right? If you want to store the logs, well, that's going to be stored. Originally it's in this container, but really it's pointing to the logs folder where Airflow is running. Same thing with this, like plugins, any plugins, I guess, that you need. This way you hold on to them the next time you boot up Airflow. You can see that if you do not have, like I did not create any folder, but once I boot up this Docker Compose for the first time, it creates this for me, okay, by virtue of these volumes right here, okay, this bind mounting. These things are like default arguments. Every time you see this dollar square bracket thing, it's saying if an Airflow UID, like user ID, is not provided, use this one. If a GID is not provided, use this one. Whatever that stuff means. You can see the same thing for the username. This one, right? If one is not provided, use Airflow. Okay, so by default, it's going to use this Airflow stuff. This thing right here, this is essentially like inheriting, right? Or like copying and pasting the content from Airflow Common down into here. So it's like storing this material as a variable. What is this material? If we let's look for Airflow Common. We want the first one. Okay. One. Is there one more? All right, I think I'm not sure if it's defined here, but it might be. This might be it, right? I'm not quite sure. This might be it, where basically this material is, essentially like a variable or it's more almost like inheritance technically, but you can think of anything it's using these specifications, right? Specifying these environmental variables, specifying these volumes, and we're saying kind of like use that here in the web server, and anything that, but you can override it with your own, by just specifying something down here. So this is the default, right? And then if you are essentially like inheriting from it, and then if you want to override it, you can. All right. So this web server has these environmental variables, right? Because they're not being overridden. right? And it has these volumes. Each one of these, of course, is a service. So this is kind of like some initial like setup stuff. Like this is like you said, kind of giving us that variable that we can now use this in different services, and we don't need to use it in Postgres, but it's setting initial whatever like username. We have another service for for Redis. Redis is another database. We don't really have to get into it. Yeah, and then this web server. This is the main thing. This is the main thing. The scheduler, right? We said that Airflow, right? Like a big part of what it does is a scheduler, and you can see that we're setting the same environmental variables here by using this Airflow common. Okay, so that's some of the fancy YAML things that they're doing. You don't have to fully understand it. You definitely don't have to write this, but at least you have now a chance of reading through this. If we go over here, I'm still waiting for it to boot up. I don't think it's booted up quite yet. See, it's still coming. You can kind of look. You can do Docker Compose PS. We can take a look. You see that it says it's running, and it also says that the web server is available at port, we're mapping port 8080 to here. So we could go to localhost 8080. My guess is it's not up yet. Yeah. What I'm waiting for, see that is for this thing to kind of like stop and tell me it's listening. What else can we talk about? Yeah, I don't know. We can look at this file a little bit while we're waiting. Any questions so far? Anything to spend a bit more on?
So I was just curious, like when we're specifying the image and there's the $ and curly brackets, is that like YAML syntax, or is that like
yeah,
like what's the necessity for this?
This is YAML syntax. It's saying you can use this Docker file, and this is a default argument of the Airflow image name. I don't know how to. So if an Airflow image name is not provided, it will use this one. So for instance, maybe you want to use the whole file, but you want to change the version of Airflow being used. That's what this is doing. Like I said, it's
so
like
you're specifying the version of the Airflow image, and also saying like going forward, if someone's using this variable, then specify this specifically.
it is setting the variable to this, but you can override it, right? So every time that we have Airflow image name, this is the default that's going to be used. Yeah. Oh, we want to change this. Damn. I want to change this to false. Well, you'll see with the mess that I built. Let's refresh. I guess we're still waiting. Yeah, you can see it just takes a few minutes to boot up, even though it says it's running. But you know what we can do? While we're waiting, let me show you kind of how we can explore this container. So we'll do Docker Compose PS. We can see it says it's running. The init is done. Oh, that's nice. That might be something good. And then we can let's connect to the web server. So do Docker exec -it, right? We're not doing the Docker Compose because we learned from last time. And now this time we should have access to bash. So I'll do bash. Okay, so we are inside our Airflow running container. If we do, we're in this folder, opt Airflow. Let's dig around, do ls. So these are our different folders, right? These are the main ones that we saw before in the Docker Compose file, right? We saw this here. Remember, mapped this opt Airflow DAGs to the file on my to the folder on my laptop. Do the same thing with logs and plugins. So that's what's happening here. Okay, this is inside our container. Currently, There is nothing inside of DAGs. This is mainly what we're going to be working with. And this is how we're going to kind of tell Docker, hey, first do this, then do this, then do that, is through this thing called DAGs. Let's see, we may be ready. Doesn't look like it, does it? Localhost 8080. Yeah, we're waiting still. Okay, so eventually there will be a website that we'll be able to interact with. If you've seen the readings, you might believe me. Let's keep going though. What we want to do is essentially have DAGs that are inside my Docker container. And doing that is not so hard, right? Because right now I'm on my laptop and I have this DAGs folder. And remember, whatever I put in my DAGs folder will be bind mounted into the container. Okay? What is a DAG? DAG stands for Directed Acyclic Graph. Essentially, like a directed acyclic graph just means that, it's a series of steps that have an order to them. And once you finish the end of the order, like for instance, pull data from one database, load it to S3, then move it into Redshift, it's directed because it's steps 1, 2, and 3. It's acyclic because once you finish it, you do not go back to the beginning and do it again, right? It's done, right? So that's not a cycle. So what we can do now is create a file. It can be called like anything you want. So I guess we'll just call it index.py. And again, like this file will be read by Airflow because it's in this DAGs folder. And then we can start to create a DAG. So the first thing that we can do, we're going to use, there's basically an Airflow library. So from Airflow, import DAG, D-A-G, I think it's all caps. Yeah. And then the next thing we'll do is we need to give our DAG, the first argument is just like a name. Okay. And then we can say the start, when do we want this DAG to start running? Normally you specify a time in the past, because if it's in the past, it will know essentially when you boot up Airflow, do it at least one initial time, right? So normally this is kind of what people will do is they'll be like, yeah, we want this to run right away. So specify a time in the past, and it will see it has not kind of performed its job yet, and get going. So we can say January 1st, 2022. You can see we're getting, this is breaking, so we need to import date time. All right, and we're gonna assign this to DAG. So if you can imagine, right, we have these tasks of extract and then load. Each of these steps are called a task. This would be task 1, this would be task 2, and all of them are going to be associated with the DAG, right? This way we can impose a sequence, first do task 1, then do task 2. First pull the data from the database, then load it to S3, right? So we're tying these things together with the DAG, and then we can kind of define a task, all right? And for us, we'll do that with a Python operator. So this is from airflow.operators. I think I can just import here, import Python operator. Okay, so these different operators that you can have a bash operator, you can have a Python operator, allow you to kind of execute programs. We'll use a Python operator for now. And now this is going to be our task, right? We can, imagine using a Python operator that, hits an API, right? For us, what we'll do is we have to give it a task ID. And we have to associate it with this DAG, okay? So the way that remember, if we kind of have this overall sequence, this overall directed acyclic graph, we have this task and we need to associate it with this DAG, tie it into it. So the way that we'll do that is just with the DAG argument. And now we can call it, we can do DAG equals DAG. We can call this our hello DAG. All right. So this task has an ID, and now it's associated with this overall like sequence. All right. And then the other thing we can do is it's this Python callable. Like, what is this task actually going to do? It's going to call a function. All right, we can even print. Okay. So I just want to make sure I get everything right. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay. So what are we doing? We have this overall DAG, right? Currently it's called like hello DAG. And then we associated a task with it. And that task, you know, we could call it anything, task 1. And that's our Python operator, so we're using Python. And the main thing we're doing is, 1, we have associated with the DAG here. So now this task 1 is a part of hello DAG. And then we're saying what to do. What do we actually do? We run this function. Notice, this is really important. Notice we don't have parentheses here. If you have these, if you put parentheses here, Python will like run the hello function right away. You don't want that to happen. You want to allow Airflow to call the hello function, right? You can imagine Airflow gets this hello function, and then it's going to execute it with the parentheses. All right. So when you pass through the function you want to be called, you cannot put parentheses. You cannot do this. Okay. You can see even VS Code was really nice for a second. It was like, what is this the equivalent of? This is the equivalent of just giving it the return value, right? You don't want to do that. You want to give it the actual function, and that way it will execute the function when the time is ready. Let's see if we're finally ready. Oh, look. It looks like we are. Ah, look at this. Beautiful. This is Airflow. It's at localhost 8080. We have to put in our username and password. If you go back to the Docker Compose file, you can see that it tells us that the default username is Airflow and the default password is Airflow. Okay. Yeah, and I should have changed that, but I guess it's okay. Mine is going to be a mess because what I should have done is turn Airflow core load examples to false when I booted this up, but it was kept at true. So you're going to see a bunch of kind of like examples here that are kind of mess. So you see this? It gives you all these examples. I don't happen to really love the fact that it does this. Okay. Now, which ones do we want to use? Ooh, I broke something. And it tried to use mine, but look at this. It's actually breaking with mine because it's saying it cannot import Python operator. So that means that this thing from airflow.operators, I must have forgotten something. Oh, so let me show you. So what has happened successfully, right? Let's do Docker Compose PS. Yeah. Is that if I exec into the web server, docker exec -it bash, right? We're going to connect to this web server and then do ls and then cd dags. See that? This is the thing I wrote initially on my laptop, but because we're bind mounting, it's there. And you can see here I have my code, right, that we wrote. The problem is I have to do from airflow.operators.python operator, and I did not. Now this should automatically be, see that? It's automatically updated in Docker Compose, but it may take a second for Airflow to pick up on it. Let's see if we refresh. All right. What was this thing called again? It was called Hello World, Hello DAG. Let's see if we have it somewhere. No. Doesn't look like it's there. Is this the same thing? No, this is the old one that has, it's still using the old code. What we can do to refresh, there is a way. So essentially we've updated the code successfully right now. But, so you can see this is my code that I updated, but Airflow is complaining about an error message that doesn't, it's saying, hey, I forgot to do .python operator, but obviously it is there. So it just hasn't refreshed it. If we want to say, hey, look to see, oh, and now it did. We made another mistake though. So now it's saying module not callable in index.py line 5. So that's this thing. I bet you I'm messing up my imports.
I think it's the datetime one.
Oh, thank you.
I think it has to be datetime.datetime.
Yeah, good idea. Can I do that as datetime?
Or you could just
From datetime, import datetime.
Yeah,
that's probably better. All right. So yeah, good catch. Right. From datetime, import datetime, and now this should be okay. So one thing I can show you is right. So it's still waiting to kind of pick up on. Wait. No module name. That's not. Oh, okay.
Oh,
it's fine.
it will. Yeah.
This is the original change I made. If you want to refresh, if you kind of don't want to wait and immediately want to refresh your DAGs, there is this. You can run this, which will, I guess, reinitialize your DAG bag, which is like the collection of DAGs that you have. So you can always just, it's in one of the readings too, but you can run this and now it will kind of immediately refresh things. I think because I have so many, that's why it's taking a while. Oh, and now we got another error. This is unexpected keyword error. Sorry about all these errors, guys. Start date, not start time. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, let's try it one more time. But this is kind of nice, like the fact that you can get these, these error messages are pretty clean. Now, the hello world has to be made of alphanumeric characters. Good point. This is not right. I need to I cannot have a space with my DAG. I need to have an underscore. All right, same way that I do it here. And now let's try this one more time. So this is a pretty useful way for debugging, I guess, is to use that Python command. And now it looks good. See that? So I kind of was able to get feedback pretty quickly by just doing this Python-C thing, which I think is pretty good. Now let's see. Let's go here. We'll refresh. And this thing was called Hello DAG or something like that. Oh, Hello World.